Taoiseach, in 2012, in Budget 2012, perhaps the single most damaging cut to education was brought in, i.e. the removal of ex-quota guidance counselling provision in our second-level schools. And if you talk to the Institute of Guidance Counsellors, for example, they did an audit since then, and they're saying that the current practice is, quote, a portrait of inequality. One member described a wave of self-harm amongst teenagers that would alarm any parent. And teachers who were expected to teach as well as be guidance counsellors said, quote, it's a bottomless pit, it's firefighting, and you can just do what you can. And that's the story all over Ireland in second-level schools since this cut was introduced. And speaking to Senator Joan Freeman, founder of Peter House last week, and she equally instanced to me the extremely damaging impact that cut had in terms of the mental well-being of young students in our second-level schools who up to then had access to guidance counsellors. This week I met Corlin Minogue in Cork City, this Cork City Young Youth Council. They did a survey on the absence of career guidance for them and their peers in second-level schools. And again, very damaging conclusions in terms of the absence of career guidance for them. There's been a 51% reduction in one-to-one counselling supports in secondary schools. The Economic and Social Research Institute did a major study on this in relation to a report on the value of guidance counselling. And they said quite clearly that it had a devastating impact on working-class students in working-class schools, and that it embedded disadvantage across our education system. And I think, and that is why I was very anxious in the confidence and supply arrangement with the government, that the reintroduction and restoration of ex-quota career guidance would be part of that agreement and would be delivered on by the government. But at times the language used, and I know there's resistance within perhaps officials within the department or people, because I can't come to this idea of suggesting that you improve the staffing schedule generally and that somehow will improve guidance counselling isn't acceptable and in my view isn't a runner because we need the ex-quota provision restored. So what I want to ask you, Minister, do you first of all accept that this is a very real issue out there for young people and teachers across second-level schools, the need to restore ex-quota provision for second-level schools, and is the government committed to bringing back ex-quota guidance counselling to our schools?
Very much. Taoiseach.
Thank you, Deputy Martin. Obviously, the programme for government strongly reasserts the very central role of education. Indeed, the very first line is education is the key to giving every child an equal opportunity in life. And there are plans to commit a huge amount of extra investment and money into our education system at every level. I recognise what you say in relation to the importance of guidance counselling, and of course we did have to take extremely difficult decisions because of the cycle of boom and bust that our country was in. And there is a commitment in the programme for government to reduce primary school class sizes, to reintroduce guidance counselling to secondary schools, and also to increase financial supports for postgraduate students with a particular focus on those from low-income households. As you said, this was part of the discussions which we had in forming the programme for government, and there is a very clear commitment to reintroduce guidance counselling. Personally, I believe from my own experience that it is extremely important in terms of identifying issues in schools, mental health issues, and working in a preventative way within schools with children who need particular advice and support. So that will be discussed during the estimates, and there will clearly be consultation in the appropriate committee in relation to quite how this reintroduction is going to be done in the coming year.
Welcome the Taoiseach's response and indeed her own personal observations in terms of the value of guidance counselling, particularly in terms of the mental health issue, because the real value of a career guidance counsellor in my view was for young people who had issues perhaps within their own family environment or personal issues. They could go to the career guidance counsellor and have a one-to-one session there without any stigmatisation around the issue of mental health. They could get counselling in a very good environment, and again, of course, with the proviso of fully qualified, dedicated guidance counsel provision. The reason I put the question, Taoiseach, is that, again, some of the replies have been somewhat ambiguous. And a spokesperson for the Department of Education said that the aim will be to provide a whole-school approach to guidance counselling, including group work, class-based activities and other activities which focus on providing the best possible outcomes for students rather than exclusively using one type of activity. And in later replies in parliamentary questions, there's talk about discretion being left to the schools and to the principals. That, in my view, isn't good enough and isn't acceptable. What is needed, and what I'm putting to you, Taoiseach, is dedicated ex-quota provision outside of the normal staffing schedule, that there will be provision for career guidance counsellors in our second level schools. Thank you very much. The time has elapsed. That's the key point. Taoiseach.
Yeah. Obviously, the former Minister for Education, Minister O'Sullivan, did make some provision for the restoration, 50% restoration of the cut that had been made in this area, which schools already will have from the 1st of September. But there is provision there for schools to examine within their own context how precisely they want to approach this. And in relation to the point that you make about dedicated, clearly that will form part of the estimates discussion, and the Minister will be examining the precise costings in relation to that. But as I say, there is a commitment in the programme government to reintroduce guidance counselling to secondary schools. But the Minister will be discussing that, obviously, with all members of the Education Committee, and it will be discussed in the context of the budget.